Every Wednesday morning, Stanley pulls the same folding chair onto his back porch, sets down a black coffee in a plain white mug, and reads. Not on his phone, not on a Kindle. Hardcover books borrowed from the public library, one a week, returned on time, every time. He is 62 years old, retired 14 months ago from a 40-year career as a process engineer at a packaging plant. Not the director, not the VP, the guy who optimized the production line and went home at 5. His neighbors know the routine. The same car, a 2011 Camry with 168,000 miles on it, the same khaki jacket, the lawn he mows himself, the 3-bedroom house that has never seen a visible renovation. Across the street, the Pattersons just installed solar panels and a heated pool. 2 lots down, the younger couple parked a brand new BMW X5 in the driveway. The neighbor next door, 10 years younger, bigger title, bigger house, talks openly about planning a real retirement in Florida. When they look at Stanley's house, some of them think the same thing. Nice guy, but he clearly never built much. Then one Sunday evening in October, Stanley's son is having dinner at his parents' house. Normal conversation, football, the grandson, the weather, until Stanley's wife mentions, between bites, that they just received confirmation the last rental property was paid off. The son stops his fork in midair. Wait, you guys own a rental property? 2, Stanley says, and the portfolio crossed $900,000 last quarter, not counting the house. The man with the 2011 Camry, the plain white mug, 40 years at a packaging plant, never earned more than $92,000 a year. $900,000 in a portfolio plus 2 paid-off rental properties generating income every single month. The son asks the question everybody asks when they finally see behind the curtain. How, Dad? How did you do that? Stanley does not give a speech. He gets up from the table, walks to the bookshelf in his study, and comes back with a book so worn that the spine is held together with tape. Yellowed pages. Pencil underlines so old they are barely legible. He bought this copy for $1.25 at a used bookstore in 1986. The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. This book was written in 1926, Stanley says, and there is one rule in here that I followed for 30 years while everybody else I know read it, agreed with it, and never applied it. That rule is what this video is about. Not the book summary, not the 7 steps, the one rule that separated Stanley from the neighbors with better cars and bigger houses and how much it cost, in dollars, every person who ignored it. The Richest Man in Babylon has sold more than 2 million copies since it was first published nearly 100 years ago. It has been recommended by every personal finance guru you have ever heard of. It sits on bookshelves in millions of American homes, and almost nobody does what it says. The book tells the story of Arkad, the richest man in the ancient city of Babylon. His neighbors, people who worked just as hard, earned just as much, came to him and asked the same question Stanley's son asked at that dinner table. How? Arkad's answer was not complicated. It was not a secret. It was a set of principles so simple that everyone who hears them nods along and says, that makes sense. And that is exactly the problem. The American personal savings rate at the end of 2024 was 3.8%. Babylon's first rule says to save at least 10% of everything you earn before you do anything else. The average American saves less than half of that. Not because they have never heard the advice, because knowing and doing are 2 completely different things. But here is what most people miss about Babylon's rules. There are several of them, and most readers treat them as a menu of good ideas to pick from. They are not a menu, they are a sequence. Each rule builds on the one before it, and the final rule in that sequence, the one at the top of the pyramid, is the rule that most people read, agree with, and completely forget. That rule is this: ensure a future income. Guarantee that money will keep coming in when you can no longer work. Not a pile of money, not a number in an account, income. Stanley understood that distinction. His neighbors did not. And the distance between those 2 outcomes, a pile versus a flow, is the single most expensive misunderstanding in retirement planning. But before we get to the rule itself, we need to understand the 2 things Stanley did first that made it possible. Because without them, the rule at the top does not work. Arkad's first instruction was simple. A part of all you earn is yours to keep. Not yours to spend, yours to keep. Stanley set up his 401k contribution in 1988, 3 years after he started at the plant. He started at 6%. Every time he got a raise, and they were small raises, 2% here, 3% there, he increased his contribution before he increased his spending. By the time he was 45, he was putting in 15%. By 50, with catch-up contributions, he was putting in even more. He did this for 34 years without stopping, without pausing during recessions, without borrowing from his retirement account to buy a car or fix the roof. That sounds straightforward. It is not. The latest data from Vanguard's How America Saves report shows that the average American 401k deferral rate is 7.7%, an all-time high. But that is the average for people who are already participating. Millions more are not contributing at all. And among those who do contribute, many start and stop. They contribute for a few years, then pull back when expenses rise. They borrow against the account. They cash out when they change jobs. Stanley never did any of that. And what it cost him was invisible. It cost him the things he did not buy, the vacations he did not take, the cars he did not lease. While the Pattersons installed a heated pool, Stanley mowed his own lawn. While the neighbor planned his Florida retirement, Stanley drove a Camry with 168,000 miles. The rule sounds simple because it is simple. The execution is hard because it requires saying no every single week for 40 years. And most people say yes just once, just this time often enough that the math never gets a chance to do its job. But paying yourself first is not the rule Stanley is talking about. It is the foundation. Without it, nothing else works. With it, you earn the right to reach the next step. Arcad's second instruction builds directly on the first. Make thy gold multiply. Do not simply save. Put your money where it will grow and produce more of itself. Stanley kept his portfolio in equity index funds for his entire career. Low cost, broadly diversified, boring. He did not pick stocks. He did not chase trends. He did not pay a premium advisory fee for someone to move his money around every quarter. And here is where his path diverged from millions of Americans who did the first step right but got the second step wrong. The most common mistake people make as they approach 60 is shifting their entire portfolio into bonds, CDs, and money market funds. It feels safe. It feels responsible. Every financial headline about protecting your nest egg reinforces the instinct. And mathematically, it is one of the most expensive decisions a pre-retiree can make. The S&P 500 returned an average of approximately 11% per year over the 10-year period ending in 2024. Bonds during the same period returned roughly 4 to 5%. On a $500,000 portfolio, that difference in annual return compounded over 10 years produces a gap of more than $200,000. But it gets worse. Layer a 1% advisory fee on top of conservative returns, and the drag becomes devastating. Research shows that a 1% annual fee on a $500,000 portfolio earning 7% will cost approximately $330,000 over 20 years. Not because the fee itself is large in any single year it starts at $5,000, but because every dollar taken out in fees is a dollar that stops compounding. The fee does not just cost you money this year. It costs you every year after, in growth you will never see. Stanley paid an expense ratio of less than 0.1% on his index funds. His neighbor paid 1.1% to a financial advisor whose fund underperformed the index in 8 of the last 10 years. Same income, same decades, radically different outcomes. And Stanley did something else that almost no one around him had the stomach to do. When the market dropped 34% in 2008, he did not sell. He did not call anyone. He did not move to cash. He opened his quarterly statement, looked at the number, closed the envelope, and went back to work on the production line. His coworkers were panicking in the break room. One of them cashed out his entire 401k that March at the bottom. Stanley finished his coffee and contributed the same percentage he had contributed every paycheck since 1988. That single non-decision, the decision to do nothing in the worst financial crisis in 70 years, was worth more than a decade of careful planning. Because the market recovered. It always has. And the people who stayed in captured all of the recovery. The people who got out locked in losses that took years to rebuild, if they ever rebuilt at all. Arcad did not say, protect thy gold. He said, make thy gold multiply. Those are opposite instructions. And the average American heard protect because protection is emotionally comfortable. Multiplication requires tolerating discomfort. It requires watching your portfolio drop 20% in a bad year and doing absolutely nothing. Stanley did nothing for 34 years. And that is why the math worked. Even if you pay yourself first, and even if you keep your money growing, the modern world has built traps that Arcad could never have imagined. And these traps violate Babylon's principles in ways that feel like love, generosity, and success, which is exactly what makes them so dangerous. The first trap is lifestyle creep in the final years of a career. This is the moment when you are earning the most money you have ever earned in your life. The promotions came, the raises accumulated, and for the first time there is room to breathe, so you spend the room. A nicer car, a kitchen renovation. Dinners that used to cost $40 now cost $120. The savings rate does not necessarily go down in percentage terms, but the gap between what you earn and what you keep stops growing right at the moment when compounding would have its greatest impact. The second trap is family. A Savings.com survey found that 50% of American parents are still financially supporting their adult children. The average amount, $1,474 a month. And here's the number that matters most for this video. Working parents contribute 2.3 times more money to their children's expenses every month than they contribute to their own retirement savings. Let that sit for a moment. 37% of parents say they have sacrificed their retirement savings specifically to help their adult children financially. This is money that leaves the portfolio and never comes back. It does not compound, it does not multiply, it just disappears, transferred out of love, out of guilt, out of a sense of obligation that no spreadsheet can argue against. Stanley's son did not know about the $900,000 portfolio because Stanley never bailed him out in ways that were visible. He helped when it mattered, but within limits that protected the system. He did not co-sign a loan for a car his son could not afford. He did not hand over $35,000 for a down payment. He did not cover credit card debt that would reappear 6 months later. And here's what makes this trap particularly cruel. No one feels like they are making a financial mistake when they are helping their child. It does not feel like a withdrawal. It feels like the right thing to do. The parent who writes a check for their daughter's emergency does not think, I just reduced my compound growth curve. They think that is what parents do. And they are not wrong. But Arcad was not talking about morality. He was talking about math. And the math does not care about your intentions. $35,000 removed from a portfolio at age 55 money that would have compounded for another 10 to 15 years does not cost $35,000. It costs closer to $70,000 by the time that parent turns 70. The gift doubled in cost before the parent ever felt it. Arcad taught that you should never entrust your gold to someone who does not know how to multiply it. In modern America, parents do exactly that out of love. And love, in this case, has a price that compounds in the wrong direction. Now we reach the rule from the title, the one Stanley followed and nearly everyone else forgot. Ensure a future income. Guarantee to thyself a stream of money for when thou can no longer work. This sounds like Arcad is simply saying, save for retirement. He is not. Read the instruction again. He does not say, build a pile. He says, ensure an income. A flow, something that comes in every month without you selling a piece of what you built. This is the distinction that separates retirees who sleep through the night from retirees who check their brokerage accounts at 3 in the morning. Most Americans build a retirement pile, a number in an account, 600,000, 800,000, a million. And then they retire and start pulling from that pile 3%, 4%, 5% a year. Every withdrawal makes the pile smaller. Every market downturn makes it smaller faster. And every month, the math gets a little tighter. Stanley did something different. Starting in his late 40s, he began buying rental property, not luxury real estate, not speculative flips. A small duplex, then a single-family home, both in the same working-class neighborhood he had lived in for 20 years. He put down large down payments from his savings, took 15-year mortgages, and let the tenants pay them off. By the time he retired at 61, both properties were nearly paid off. His wife mentioned the final payment at that dinner because it was the last one. 2 properties, fully owned, generating rental income every single month. On top of that, his $900,000 portfolio was not sitting in a money market fund. A portion was allocated to dividend-producing investments, not speculative, not exotic, just broad-based funds that paid quarterly dividends as a byproduct of owning profitable companies. Stanley's retirement income does not come from selling pieces of his life. It comes from assets that produce income while staying intact. The pile does not shrink. It feeds him. His neighbor, the one planning the Florida retirement, has a larger portfolio on paper, but every dollar of his retirement spending comes from withdrawals. He is eating the pile. And the pile has an expiration date that moves closer every month. Think about what that does to a person psychologically. Every grocery run is a withdrawal. Every dinner out is a withdrawal. Every unexpected medical bill is a withdrawal that accelerates the clock. And the retiree knows it. He checks the account not because he is financially irresponsible, but because he built a system that requires him to watch it shrink. The anxiety is baked into the design. Now, think about Stanley. His mortgage payments on the rentals are done. Rent comes in on the first of every month. Dividends arrive quarterly. His Social Security check covers daily expenses. The $900,000 portfolio sits there, and he has not touched it. Not once in 14 months. It is not his income. It is his safety net. His income comes from somewhere else. That is a completely different emotional experience of retirement. Same age, comparable net worth, one sleeps through the night, the other does not. That is the rule. Not save enough, ensure an income, build something that pays you so you never have to sell what you built. It is the last rule in our CODS sequence because it requires the first two. You cannot build income-producing assets if you never paid yourself first. You cannot afford rental properties or a dividend-generating portfolio if you never let your gold multiply. The rules are not a menu, they are a staircase. And the top step, the one most people never reach, is the step where your money starts working for you permanently. Let us put a number on it. Imagine Stanley's neighbor, same career, same income, roughly $85,000 to $92,000 a year over 40 years, but he made three different choices. First, he saved inconsistently. He started at 4%, paused during a divorce, restarted at 3%, gradually worked back up to 7%, the national average. Over a 40-year career, his total contributions were significantly lower than Stanley's, simply because of the gaps. Second, at age 52, he moved 70% of his portfolio into bonds and CDs. It felt responsible. His advisor recommended it. And for 10 years, his money grew at roughly 4% instead of the 8 to 10% that equities would have delivered. Third, he never built an income stream. No rental property, no dividend allocation, just a pile and a plan to withdraw from it. Run the math with conservative assumptions. 7% average return for equity, 4% for bonds, a 1% advisory fee on the conservative portfolio, and the contribution gaps and the difference between Stanley's position at 62 and his neighbor's position at 62 is not a small number. Stanley has $900,000 in his portfolio plus 2 paid-off properties generating income. His neighbor, with similar earnings over the same decades, has roughly $410,000 and no income stream. The gap is not $490,000. It is $490,000 plus a monthly income that Stanley receives and his neighbor does not. 3 rules from a book written in 1926, a copy that cost $1.25. And the difference between those two retirements is worth nearly $500,000 plus income that will continue for the rest of Stanley's life. The gap did not come from a difference in intelligence. It did not come from a difference in salary. It came from the difference between reading a rule and following it. Between agreeing with a principle and actually living by it for 30 years. Both men read the same books. Both men heard the same advice. Both men nodded at the same financial wisdom. One of them acted on it so consistently that it became invisible, as automatic as brushing his teeth. The other agreed with it so completely that he assumed agreement was enough. And by the time the gap between them became visible, it was 40 years wide. If you are watching this and thinking, I did not do what Stanley did, I am already 60, is it too late? The answer is no. But the playbook looks different when the runway is shorter. You cannot replicate 34 years of contributions in 5. That math does not exist. But you can do 3 things right now that apply Babylon's rule to where you actually are. First, redefine what pay yourself first means in your 60s. If you are still working, maximize your catch-up contributions. If you are retired, The rule translates to this: decide your withdrawal rate before you decide your lifestyle, not the other way around. Most people set their lifestyle and then hope the math works. Stanley decided the math first and let the lifestyle follow. Second, stop paying for protection you do not need. If you are paying 1% or more in advisory fees for someone to keep your money in bond funds, do the calculation. Run the number over 10 years. See what that fee is actually costing you. You may find that a low-cost index fund and a $200 a year financial plan gives you better math than a $60,000 decade of managed mediocrity. Third, and this is the rule that matters most, start building income now, not 30 years from now. Now. A small rental property, a dividend reallocation in your portfolio, a part-time consulting practice that generates cash without requiring you to sell assets. The point is not to match Stanley's position. The point is to shift from a model where every dollar you spend is a dollar gone forever to a model where at least some of your spending is covered by money that replenishes itself. Even a partial shift changes everything. If your monthly expenses are $4,000 and you can cover $1,000 of that with rental income or dividends, you have just reduced your portfolio withdrawal rate by 25%. That does not sound dramatic. But over a 20-year retirement, that single shift can mean the difference between your money lasting until 92 and your money running out at 79. The math is not subtle. It is brutal. And it all comes down to whether the dollars flowing out of your life are being replaced by anything flowing back in. Stanley did not start with a grand plan to own 2 rental properties. He started with 1 duplex, a large down payment, and a 15-year mortgage. He was 48. It was not elegant. It was not exciting. His friends thought he was crazy for taking on a mortgage that late in life. But he was not buying a house. He was buying an income stream. And that is a completely different calculation. Arcad did not say, build the biggest pile. He said, ensure a future income. And whether you are 42 or 62, the instruction is the same. The urgency changes. The principle does not. Wednesday morning, Stanley is on the back porch again. Black coffee, plain white mug. The library book of the week in his hands, the Camry in the driveway, the lawn he will mow later this afternoon. The Pattersons are heating their pool. The couple down the street is waxing the BMW. The neighbor is on the phone with a realtor in Sarasota, running numbers that keep not working out. And Stanley reads. He does not read The Richest Man in Babylon anymore. He does not need to. The book is on his shelf, spine held together with tape, right where his son saw it that Sunday evening. The pencil underlines from 1986 are still there. The same words, the same instruction, the same rule. The book did not change in 40 years. Stanley did not change either. That was the point. Everybody reads the rule. Everybody agrees with the rule. Almost nobody follows the rule for 30 years without stopping. And the distance between those two groups, the people who agree and the people who follow, is the most expensive gap in personal finance. It is not measured in percentages. It is measured in the difference between checking your brokerage account at 3 in the morning and sleeping straight through the night. One rule. $1.25, 30 years. If this is your first time here, this channel is about the financial patterns that separate people who retire comfortably from people who retire anxiously, and most of the time, the difference is smaller and simpler than anyone expects. If that sounds like something worth exploring, the subscribe button is right there.